So the recording started. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to CRM COE Roundtable. Excellence. It's a noun. The quality of being outstanding or extremely good. That's what we are going to talk about today. I don't know how many of you watched yesterday. Rovers landed on Mars yesterday. Do you remember how many million miles it traveled to go to Mars? Anyone? The panelists, how many million miles?
I don't know.
Okay, so it traveled 292.5 million miles, putting a foreign object on Mars. Yeah, hardware, fuel, and designed by engineers and people. And then at the same time, the major component is the software. So can you imagine people working together? Folks, if you are not listening, can you put yourself on a mute? Thank you. Can you imagine the software behind? Can you imagine the excellence behind the software that went through? So today we are going to talk about CRM delivery excellence. So that's the topic that we will have. We have great thought leaders to discuss about this topic. Mac Lakshmanan from HESC, Andrew Davis from Capado, Stella Michael from Spectrum Health. And I would like them to introduce themselves to you or us. And Mac, do you want to go first? Mac, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, now I'm able to unmute. I don't know, it earlier stalled me from unmuting myself. Thanks. Hi all. My name is Mac Lakshmanan. I'm the AVP and Application Development Head for HCSC, which is Healthcare Services Corporation. In the marketplace, we are known as Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, Texas, New Mexico, Montana, and Oklahoma. Velu asked me to also share a few of my fun facts about me along with my job description of my role. So I manage an organization of developers and technologists, a team of around 550 internal staff and across close to 1,000 consultants that support us for all sort of development, and Salesforce being one of them. We have a very large Salesforce ecosystem within our Blue Cross Blue Shield consortium, and it's one of my foremost points of interest for the future as we go ahead. On the fun fact side, I love motorcycling, and I'm just looking at my frozen motorcycle for the last 3 months, I would say, and I'm thinking it's going to take another 4 months to unfreeze, so waiting for the days back from spring to get it started. Over to you.
Thank you, Mac. I appreciate sharing that. Andrew?
Hey, Velu, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to have a chance to be here with the group. So I'm Andrew Davis. I'm from Capado. I've been with Capado for going on 2 years now. I've been in the Salesforce space for about 7 years full-time. I'm also the author of the book Mastering Salesforce DevOps. I'm kind of a big fan of the whole topic of increasing development teams' efficiency, building on Salesforce in particular. In terms of fun facts, the main one that I use is I spent my formative career years, 15 years as a Buddhist monk before I got into Salesforce consulting. So that was a slightly unusual career path here.
That's a real fun fact. Thank you, Andrew, sharing that, but that's probably, you are an expert here in this DevOps world. So probably that helps. Great. Thank you. Stella?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to be here as part of this panel. I from Spectrum Health. It's a integrated healthcare system, and I've been with Spectrum Health since 2013. played multiple roles as a developer, as a product lead, product owner, and now our teams lead the end-to-end support and development and maintenance of all CRM applications across the enterprise, which is both the health plan and the healthcare delivery system. In terms of the fun fact, my husband and I love national parks. So we have been to almost all the top 10 national parks in the US. So we love nature, and so do my kids, which is a blessing because it's not a drag for them. And we visited pretty much all the top 10 national parks.
Thank you, Stella. I appreciate it. All right. My name is Velu Palani. I'm the CRM COE leader. I work for HCSC Corporation. I lead the Salesforce platform team. And I've been in the ecosystem for about 20 years, specifically on the Salesforce side. A lot of people ask, do you know anything outside of Salesforce? And I say that Salesforce itself, I have to learn too much, and I don't claim that I know everything. But my fun fact about myself, I traveled quite a bit. I do travel a lot. And then I have hiked in many places. The last hike that we did was 4 years ago. We went to Patagonia there for 10 days, lost about 10 pounds in 10 days. And then the one we went 2 years ago, we went to Kilimanjaro. So all my hiking friends completed the hike, but I only did 1 day hike. So I couldn't do the whole thing. So I kind of bailed out. So I do have a big hiking group. So we almost every year we do a hiking across the country, sometimes outside the country. All right, so we'll get started. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And today's topics, we will be discussing about, what is DevOps and what is the relationship between delivery and DevOps. That's going to be, we should take that clarity before we get started. So that's one of the topics. And once we understand that relationship between the DevOps and the CRM delivery, then we talk about why is the CRM DevOps is so important. And then what's the current state? Is everybody in the same state? And where are we today? And then what's the maturity models? If companies have a different level of maturity, where do they stand? And if they don't have one, and how can they put together a plan to mature? And what should organization do to mature the DevOps? And then suddenly you can have DevOps, but if you don't know how to measure and what to measure, that's going to be challenging. And then finally, if you have COE, then what is the role of COE? What can you expect and what should you expect? So that's the topic that we chose today, and we are going to go through that, and we will get this started. So I would like to start with what is DevOps. It is end-to-end software delivery process optimization to increase speed, improve quality, and maximize value. If you think about, yes, a simple definition. But the important piece for us, what is the relationship between the delivery and the DevOps? So I would like to ask this question, rather than me explaining it, I would like to go to the experts and see what is their take on it. Andrew, how is DevOps related to CRM delivery excellence?
Good question. So CRM delivery excellence, if you're talking about the word delivery, if you could use in different contexts, but if you're talking about delivering the CRM application, the initial rollout and then ongoing updates, then that's the broader category. And DevOps is a way of looking at that process with a mind towards optimizing it. And so the broader DevOps communities come out of software development, focusing on things like version control, automating deployments, automating testing, and basically making sure that whole delivery lifecycle doesn't have any technical slowdowns, and that also doesn't have any cultural slowdowns, that you have all the teams trying to collaborate with a common motivation to bring as much value as possible, optimizing as you've got their speed, quality, and value.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So Mac, any operation to be successful, whether it's a delivery or anything that we do, we need good people and of course, best optimized processes and technology. you and I work together, so I pretend that I know you, and I do work with you. So Kpis is a large organization, large enterprise, and you are leading a large team, very complex environment. What are you doing to create the culture, the DevOps mindset at HCSC?
It's a key question, Velu, and like over the years, right? Like I started as a developer for Amazon when in the late 80s, and at that point of time, it was not that the DevOps practices were not there. It was a part of something that you had to do manually, right? Like in terms of the code components together, in terms of moving code from one place to another, one environment to another, and then releasing it, managing back into the uh, planning part to what you delivered, and then building the whole cycle. It took a lot of time, right? It took developers from the core of what they did, the essence of what they did, and there were tons of mistakes that were happening, right? So today's developer, which I say that is on the world of core with cloud and the things coming around, being a full stack developer, you mean the DevOps practices are inbuilt into what you do. It's not just about just developing code, but understanding the art of how code evolves into a pure functional piece of delivery. So we have built that into our DNA at this point of time. And in fact, every one of my developers, it's something that they cannot live with. It's become that part of the culture as we are looking at it. It's no more a separate process. It's become a part of the DNA. So when you say I'm a developer, it means that yes, I am well versed in doing all the DevOps practices that come along with it. So that's my take on it.
All right, thank you, Mac. I do hear you, and I do run a Salesforce user group here in Chicago. The question sometimes I ask people, how do when you think about the developers or the development team, they're very, very techy. They want to get things moving. Don't waste my time. I really want to get things going. But no, in order for you to get things going, you need to have that mindset and the culture. So, same question to Stella. What are you doing? You've been in you and I talked before. You are little ahead of us in terms of the journey, DevOps journey. What are you doing to cultivate the culture and keep the culture going as a DevOps leader?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the words culture and mindset. I really think DevOps is all about that. It is making that shift in your mindset to think about it as a whole, as Mac was mentioning. And honestly, it takes a lot of courage for us to stop and inspect and say, okay, these things are not adding value. Let's stop doing it. Let's look at ways how we can add value innovatively. And you have to try to experiment, So I think for us, it is important that we're innovating, we're taking risk, and we're failing fast so that we're continuously improving. At Spectrum Health, we've embraced the scaled agile framework, Willow. So I think we're looking at what does that has to offer from a DevOps standpoint, and how do we mature so that, as you mentioned, we're reducing the time to market, we're increasing quality, we're building alignment with our business stakeholders. They are very involved in our work, which is a good thing because now we're not selling them. They understand that this is important for us to be successful. So I think for us, as we continue to mature, we're focusing on all those areas that need to continuously be improved and fine tune and kind of fine tune, so that we're getting the maximum benefits of all the investments we're making in.
Very good. Thank you, Stella. I appreciate it. I think, the DevOps, if you ask me, maybe Andrew, you can add to this. 10 years ago, the definition of DevOps versus today, the DevOps definition, do you see any change in terms of understanding people? Do they have the similar understanding when it started 10 years ago or whatever the number of years ago and today?
The term DevOps is typically, they say, was coined maybe 12 years ago, so 2009. So it's a relatively newer term, but it's basically a lot of energy has gathered around that term and the community and so forth. So topics like agile and team dynamics and automation, a lot of that stuff just is brought up in that is brought up in that context. And so DevOps really has a very broad meaning. It's everything that's necessary to help a software delivery team flourish, including all of the cultural changes and so forth. So I would say one of the big movements that I've seen is a shift from just getting the development teams talking with the sysadmins and the operations teams and beginning to use common tools, moving from that foundation to what's called value stream thinking and value stream management, where you begin to look at the entire process holistically, as Stella was saying. And then getting everybody together, looking creatively at the whole process, questioning, making those bold questions about, is this really bringing value? Can we remove some of these steps, without being threatened? Oh, well, that's my part of the process. What if you remove that? What do I do? Having some of that innovative discussion that's a bit bold, allowing you to experiment, to optimize that holistic process. When the team starts thinking holistically about the value that they're delivering internally, then it's much easier to go to the business and say, look at how we're optimizing for your benefit. We're optimizing for our internal customers' benefit. It's not just, sticking things in individual silos because that's convenient for us.
Very good, thank you. So I hear you, Andrew. I think it's, if I'm hearing right, it's more people are embracing it. People feel that it is it has to be part of your development culture. It has to be part of your professional life. Am I hearing right, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so. But it's like all of these things, it's very iterative. You make some progress and you fall back, and some people are enthusiastic and then you get caught up and busy doing other work. So it's an ongoing evolution. But I think, like Mac was saying, if you look back over the last 20 years, 25 years, we're making progress, but it's not always linear. And, we're just doing the best we can with the real pains we're having.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we briefly touched upon DevOps, but we always, in anything in life, if you take a 2-year-old or if you're an 8-year-old, the question is why? Why am I doing what I'm doing? So that is going to be the important thing that we need to understand. Why CRM DevOps? So I call it specifically CRM. You can call it Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or anything. Especially 4 of us, we are more closely aligned to Salesforce ecosystem as a CRM. And if you remember, I'm sure you all been working with Salesforce for many years. When I started 20 years, I started in 2000, June 13. That's when I got my first Salesforce instance. I remember very, very vividly that it had about 8 or 9 tabs. That's all it had. Accounts, opportunities, contacts, leads, reports, and dashboards. So if you click on reports, not like today, you just reports that comes with tons of reports, some few reports. And when I had to give up my org 2 years ago because of my contractual agreement. And when you see that it has matured into complex application, the ecosystem app exchange, and you can build your own apps. But to do what? To manage the to do all those things, it's important that you have to understand the process. You have to control the cost. Salesforce or Microsoft or Oracle, or any CRM, it is not cheap. It is expensive. So you got to manage the cost. And to do that, you need to make sure you have a vibrant delivery culture. So it's all about the excellence and the delivery culture. So we all know the basic benefits. Hey, if I put some money, I need to get the money back. Some money back, and then we all understand, and most of us understood, the faster you deliver software, it helps you to deliver, it actually delivers your company performance. Now, it's a profound statement. The software delivery directly relates to your company performance. Andrew, how do you explain that to the audience?
Sure. So, our companies presumably have chosen Salesforce or some CRM system because we thought, okay, it's going to be financially beneficial to not have to maintain our own infrastructure and just focus on, things that are value added for our organization. and that's just the first decision in many decisions that basically how the company operates, how every company operates is increasingly determined by software. I mean, software is at the architecture of our daily activities. I start my day on my computer, I end my day on the computer. When I walk away from the computer, my day's over. There's no work that happens outside of that. So all of the systems you're building, that is the method by which our organizations get work done these days. So if every company is becoming a software company, right? That means the company's ability to change, adapt, enter new markets, change their processes and so forth is dependent upon the speed and ease with which you can change your software. And so these teams that like Stella and Mac are looking after, these people are responsible for adapting, helping the whole company to adapt, new processes, new markets, automating this, automating that. How readily can we do that? That has an impact on the whole company. My influence largely comes from the State of Devops reports, biggest, largest, longest running survey of its kind, 31,000 respondents over 6 years. Every year they saw, if you look at that, they saw that there was a predictive relationship between software delivery performance, how quickly teams could get features out, how reliably can you do it without breaking things, and company performance. They found that they could predict high company performance based on the software delivery performance. Teams that really excelled at rolling out changes, that companies tended to thrive. There's a lot of factors that go into a thriving company, but software delivery is increasingly one of those.
Excellent. And I have one more follow-up question, and this is probably going to be a little bit tougher to answer, but let me see how well you can help us with. The recent IDC study shows that if you have 2,000 users in your company, 10 admins/developers, $100 per user per month. If you think about your operating cost, 50% is license, 50% is the staffing cost. What study says it's a 545% is what you get the ROI. You know, I've been working in this industry for a while. I'm sure Mac and Stella, you get pressure. Hey, why am I spending this money? So how realistic is to measure ROI? Is it a myth, or is it really something that you can go after measuring the ROI?
Do you want me to field that one?
Yes.
It's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and working on over the last year and a half in particular. I think about it like the way we need to take in calories into our body to survive, and then we need to be productive and bring some benefit somehow in the external world, right? Can I say from this piece of food that I ate, did it definitely directly lead to productivity during my day? No, I can't, right? And neither can you say this particular user story brought this much value to the organization. But you know that in general, you're doing good work. You're nourishing your body, taking in good food. Similarly, we're building the code base. We're adapting to the needs of the business, and as a result, the business is thriving. So the ROI calculations, it's not direct. There's the technical side of the world, which doesn't operate in dollars. And then there's the business side, where we have thriving organizations that can meet their sales goals and achieve all of their particular, the organizational goals that they need. But you can't make a one-to-one connection between a particular technical change and particular financial benefit in general, but they're both but the underlying health of your organization is largely digital health, right? So if you can keep a healthy organization digitally, low technical debt, high efficiency, high collaboration, low downtime, all of those kinds of things, that's going to help the organization thrive in general. So it's an indirect relationship. I'm not sure if my analogy fully got conveyed, but
no, I think I get it. And I would like to have Andrew and Mac, when you are asked to provide this kind of answer to this question to the leadership from your side, what's your take on it?
Well, you want me to go for it? Yeah. So I would say, right, let's say from history, right, the last 10 years of operation, I would say an ROI of 30% is by default in bringing in the right DevOps practices. And I'm going to maybe make it into the circle of maybe within the Salesforce CRM, because I think so most of the folks who have attended the call are attending the call are from that side. The amount of issues that we had between the developers and the admins and the architects, between planning and environments and code movements and the testing and then the validation and deployment, we had to deploy tons of people between all of this manually to manage these constituents. And sometimes it took more than half of the developer. I mean, say if I had 10 developers, I had 6 people managing around them on all of these things, right? So what's happened is the effort spent on the tool sets, the right tool sets like Copado, or for this environment or AutoRabbit, things around that has really saved us 30% straight out of the bat. I mean, I can have every metric to say that's true. And in fact, in certain other places, for example, if I look at our digital space where we have single click deployments going on, right? So if you look at all the way from your build tools, so Jenkins and Maven and JUnit and Sonar Nexus and udeploy and Selenium and all the way to the cloud movement during Azure deployment cycles, I would say that it's almost 60-70% in terms of the scale of effort saved and all the people in between that we've avoided. And imagine in a team of almost 1,000, how much of money and scale it is. So it is quintessential at this point in time that people don't ask for an ROI. When you talk about DevOps, that's assumed now that they just say, okay, go ahead and do it. So it's like that. So.
Oh, thank
And
you,
I will, Vilu, one thing
ahead.
I'll mention, the 545% from the IDC study, that's a 5-year ROI, which means 45% per year, but it partly just speaks to the power of compounding the benefit, right? 45% this year, and then some of the benefit accumulates as your process increases. So even these small performance improvements make a huge difference over a number of years.
That now it gives me some confidence that when I go and ask for money, hey, I have experts validating that this has been proven. Do you agree with that, Stella?
Yes, I think we've come a long way from where we were a few years ago to now. I always go with what's in it for them. So when you're trying to ask somebody for the dollars to sign the check, you always want to speak their language. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of our technical people can't speak that language, right? You're talking business terms, you're talking ROI. So I think it's always important for us to go and say, okay, what's in it for you? And I think we touched upon it when Andrew and Max spoke about one of the biggest things that companies today are looking at is people, right? We at Spectrum Health do something called employee listening survey. So every quarter we send out a survey, we try to get feedback, and having a DevOps culture and focusing on what they need to be more efficient and optimal in their areas drives our scores up. So your employee engagement is going up because we are saying, hey, we hear you. You don't have to manually do these things that are not adding, significant value for us from an organizational standpoint. So I think trying to translate those savings of FTE hours into something that's much more beneficial is going to be critical. So you, in a way, are almost a salesperson, but I think that uphill battle is not as much now. Because I think the pandemic has shifted our, mindset to say we got to get it delivered as soon as we can. It's bringing front and center how we can accelerate the software delivery.
Thank you. So, Stella, I have a follow-up question on this one because you are, compared to many organizations, we will see the DevOps state of DevOps in the next topic. You are using a platform. I've worked with your team. You're very energetic, very engaged team that I've noticed. And you are using a platform. How is your tool? We talked about the process. We talked about the culture and the people. So how is it helping you and your team? Can you share some insights with the plan? You can't just manually measure everything. So whatever the tool that you're using, how is it helping you to measure your ROI or tricks that you want to say?
Definitely. So when we started our journey, it was all grassroots level. So we went with our engineers and identified what are our pain points, what is the areas that we're having friction. And then we said, okay, what are those capabilities that we need for a platform or a tool to help support that? And so we've looked at GearSet. That's our deployment tool that we currently use. But as we talked about, DevOps has multiple steps from the time an idea is generated to the time it's deployed. So GearSet plays one critical part where it helps us almost to 20 to 30 FTE hours are saved because of the, one-click push that we talked about, or just not having to manually work through every release and change. The other thing we're also focusing on is trying to look at, test automation. We're trying to use Selenium to reduce those manual testing hours. So we're again saving around like 10 FTE hours per run before we deploy for every release. And I think another kind of tool in that tech stack is Dynatrace. So we use that to monitor our releases after they've gone out. So if there are any system outages, any unplanned downtimes, we get proactive notifications that kind of help us to get to a quicker issue resolution. So GearSet really has helped propel, our DevOps journey. We work with them directly, and we also try to have them make some changes for us so that we can benefit from those up and coming beta changes. The other thing that we also look at in our COE, and we'll talk about it later, is how can we get our business partners to be self-sufficient? So we're trying to get them involved, and whatever changes they're making, they should be also able to deploy with a click of a button without not having to, be too involved in the technical details of it. So I think overall, we've been pretty pleased with the, outcomes of using this tool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think the conversation getting exciting. I'm sure the people who are listening here, they're saying, okay, so if it's important that everything that we do, we need to understand why we are doing it. And this is, if I remember correctly, like 10 years ago, I was very actively involved in developing applications. I did write an application, put it on App Exchange. It's still there. Nobody uses it. That's a different issue. I just retired it, but they don't want to take it off. If Salesforce is listening, I'm sure they will take this one off. But the important piece, when I developed the application, there was no, it's 10 years ago, so there is no CI/CD tool or anything. We actually manually managed it through an Excel sheet. So I can see the real pain point of using, yes, today we use Capado. We are very pleased with the way we are using the product and how to help us to make things moving. But so I see quite a bit of opportunity and the improvement in terms of how we move things. And when Mac comes and asks me, well, tell us what's going on, and I should be able to get that the metrics for him. So we will talk about the metrics there. So we talked about the why. I'm sure that we need a lot more time, but we are running out of time. So let's move to the next topic, the current state of DevOps. So if I remember, as I said, 10 years ago when I started, I mean, very, very vaguely understood the Agile and understood DevOps. I just went ahead and said, okay, let's start developing an app. So we were one of the top 100 apps, very few apps that were there when we started this. So the important piece here, the current state of DevOps, this is the 2021 survey put out by Capado. And you see the numbers here. 23% of the companies use automation tools. So we still a long way to go. In 2020, 82% of the companies retained the workforce, which is good news. I think the pandemic is a big year for us. 53% of the organization exceeded their performance in the last year. And further, the study shows that speed and reliability trend together. If you look at the other two topics, I'm not too concerned. Software delivery predicts company performance. We already looked at it. Larger teams struggle to move fast. It's a common sense. What intrigued me, speed and reliability. Everything from your childhood, it said, don't go fast, you will fall down. And if you go faster, you will make mistakes. This is what we are mentally hearing all the time. But when I see that speed and reliability trend together, I took the report, I read the report, it's a 60-page report, and that really triggered me. So I'm going to go to Andrew. I'm sure you are the one who finished the report. I'm just joking. I know you probably understand how the report was done. So what is your understanding on this survey finding, specifically speed and reliability trend together? How does that work?
Well, if it was your parents who first told you don't go too fast, you'll fall, they were right, because it's true. The limit on your ability to go fast is your ability to stay stable. It is your ability to go fast safely. And I'd like to think about in your car, you've got two pedals. You've got your accelerator and you've got your brake. You can only go as fast as your brakes can help control things. But what you see is that, you know, you think about the history of cars over the last 100 years, the history of software development over the last, 40 years, your ability, the two do correlate together. They do tie together. And the teams that have very high stability, the teams that are able to, for example, one thing that lends to stability is being able to make just a small release, that you don't have to re-release the entire Salesforce application every time you want to deploy it. So sometimes when people first start tracking things in version control, the only way they can do that is just redeploy everything. But that's a big change, and so if you're able to do things like having the tooling to make only small deployments, deploy small changes, it reduces the risk of every change, which means you can do more of those small deployments. If each deployment is one click, as you all were saying, if it's not a huge ordeal, and if it's low risk and low pain, you can have a lot more deployments. You can get key capabilities out a lot faster. So that's why the two trend together. And the teams that really struggle with all aspects of this, because they only have manual processes and so forth, they struggle both on the stability and on the speed side. And the teams that have managed to master, making small changes without putting the whole org at risk, and they have high stability, then they're able to go a lot more quickly. They get a small request from the business, they can deliver the small request same day, even if it's something very, very doable.
So I think it's what the important piece here to understand. It's you gotta have, it's a maturing or it's an evolution. You don't go right away. Speed and reliability go together. But I think it's a maybe once you have matured to a level, then you can say that speed and reliability can go together. Is that
Yeah,
a
it's
fair
like
statement?
like Mac on his motorcycle now. He started on a bicycle and he was going very slow and a little bit unstable. Then he became very good at a bike, and then he's graduated at this point. Now he's 90 miles an hour. So
That's why I don't drive anymore when Mac is. Okay, Stella, the question is, where do we stand in this transformation, particularly in the healthcare industry? Do you have any insight that you can share with us, especially the trending?
Yeah, I think healthcare is a services industry. So our goal is to deliver care. Our mission at Spectrum Health is to improve health, inspire hope, and save lives. So that's going to be our core mission always. Now, I think in the last few years, the topic has gained a lot of popularity, but the pandemic basically pushed the acceleration. So what we're seeing is those lines between how care has been traditionally delivered and how it's being delivered now has blurred. It's because of the digital transformation. Now it's, where virtual first mentality is coming into picture. So now leaders are saying, okay, what do I need to get this thing going? So it's really front and center. So DevOps is not now taking backseat. It is in the front and driving seat. Now the question is, how fast can we get it done, and how fast can we help the business to get to their goals? So what I would say is, I think it still takes a lot of time for us to get through some of the systemic barriers or cultural shifts that need to be made in the healthcare industry. But I think we're trending towards a positive direction, and I'm encouraging all my friends who are on this call today to, capitalize on this momentum that we got because of the pandemic, because that's going to help us a lot. Because people are saying, okay, I need next app or next solution, next digital, next virtual, and then we can bring and say, well, we could do that if we can, mature our DevOps process.
Thank you, Stella. Mac, a big question is something that, I'm more one CRM guy kind of person, and especially in your area, you manage Salesforce, legacy applications, modern client. I wouldn't call it client server anymore. That people might get offended if I say client server. Different types of applications. Do you see that DevOps applies to everything, every parts of application development at the same level? Or do you see Salesforce DevOps is different than Java application or a mainframe application? Where do you think, is there a difference?
So the tool sets and the DNAs are different, but I mean the tool sets are different, but the DNA is the same, right? For example, still we have 20% of our applications mainframe area, right? So people think mainframe do not have DevOps practices and things around it, but it's surprising that we have had the latest release of DevOps for mainframe, because there are still companies that have been kept on with that and they're automating that part of it. So it's you cannot say something as legacy and say that, oh, it's out. So mainframe, which is maybe older than me from where I see it, the system that we have, that we have an automation index and we are starting to look at it from that angle, right? And so there is a base set of practices that stay constant. There is a base set of orchestration that remains constant, but then maybe the particulars, for example, Copado for this environment, for this particular purpose, our cloud and cloud foundry related applications will have a different set of practices depending upon that. The sublines change, and you have to be organized for the company, right? And it's not just even the Salesforce team, because the Salesforce team is going to have some releases that are going to be dependent on these mainframe units, for example, or on any of these digital external facing applications. So the orchestration of this DevOps will actually go through the cycle. Today, there's no singular or singleton application sets, right? So it's all related ecosystem. So in a company, we'll have to look at DevOps as a holistic cycle, and then maybe modify the tool sets that help with that in a slightly different angle. So the overall pipeline is something that you still need to look at and maintain. Yep.
Perfect. I thank you, Mac. I did not even realize that I started my career with mainframe. I never even thought that there would be a DevOps for mainframe. No, thank you for sharing that. I think it's an excellent insight. So the DevOps applies to regardless of what platform you have. As you said, the tools might be different, but the concept is same. The benefits are going to be same. Are the value and the reason why we do and how we put this together. I think except the tool, everything should remain constant. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. So now let's move to the next topic. Maturity model. I was reading this article, vitalflex.com, where I was, either can you just jump in and start going at 70 miles an hour, or you have to go 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles? The common sense says that you have to go step by step, which anything in life. But if you look at this, the visual, you start with ad hoc, proof of concept, argued adoption, sustained and repeatable. Finally, you have an optimized DevOps. I think if I would say optimized DevOps, it is ever optimizing. I don't think you will say it's going to be continuous optimization, right? So, Mac, how in this journey, especially, as I said, I'm more of a CRM guy, Salesforce guy. I'm sure I can speak a little bit for Stella, but I don't want to speak 100%. And Andrew, he's an expert in the Salesforce DevOps. But when you look at overall ecosystem, Mac, how do you know that we are succeeding in this journey? I know we can say hey, look at the metrics and measure, but what else is underlying factors that we should be looking at so that we are we are successful in the journey?
Right. If you look at it, speed to market, throughput, and quality is something that all of us track and all of us look at it, right? The teams that evolve high on this maturity ladder that you have, you can automatically see those three elements actually upticking a lot. And I have exact data to showcase that. And there are a few teams that are still caught in a legacy world where DevOps is going to bring transparency into your whole process. That is, I mean, everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows what's failing. You know, what is the quality of the thing that you're developing. But there are legacy units which still feel that, oh, I need to keep it close to my heart. So they would integrate in intermediate coordinates, but they will not build a whole thing life cycle around it. And when you look at that to areas like, for example, in few of places like my digital team out there, where they've automated the entire life cycle, the speed to market is very high. The confidence level of the business asking for changes that this team can make it on time is very high. The rework is less because you are removing a lot of these manual things that are going on in between on this particular front. So from an agility standpoint, so the three metrics that I look at it is predictability, productivity, and defect density, right? That I look across all of our teams, like 160 teams in operation. If I just start looking at the numbers of their predictability index, and then I just map them to their DevOps practices, there's a direct correlation that teams with higher DevOps cycle have a higher predictability in the life cycle. It's clean, straight. I can stand here and prove it to you 10 times repetitively that's what the case is. So yes, I mean, as you move up this ladder, you see that in the output that's coming in the back end.
No, Mac, thank you. It's just very exciting to hear. And I wish I had one-on-one conversation with you on this topic. No, this is great that you are sharing with this larger community. Stella, what framework do you have a framework that you follow in terms of maturity? Okay, hey, here is where we are today, and here is where we want to go, other than just simply following this common sense approach.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've embraced the scaled agile framework. And so, the main things that we're looking as part of that DevOps model is you're gaining alignment across value streams, you're building in quality through and through from the time an idea is generated to the time that it's delivered. You're also trying to, as Mac mentioned, reduce your time to market. So you're able to do that. And then you're releasing on demand, right? You're able to be agile and flex between when the business can say, well, I need to deploy it now and today, or I need to deploy it only to a segment of my population and not to everyone. So there are different recommendations and best practices that SAFe shares. We're not there yet, but I think our teams are starting to look at what does that mean for us, what are our goals, and it's also about readiness. I think a lot of the times organizations are not ready for that fast of a change. So trying to work through what can we win and how can we bring along with us our teams and our business stakeholders, because at the end of the day, our goal is to get things done in the fastest way possible, optimizing all our resources. So there are a few things that we try to target, but it's still a journey.
Thank you, Stella. I agree. It is a journey, and it's about the people level of understanding. As Max said, the moment you bring the transparency, people have to embrace it. People who cannot embrace the change and then the culture, probably they won't fit in. They will. You can see some people will have resistance. Either they have to change or they may not be a fit for the organization. I think, is it a fair statement, Andrew, that this brings a lot of transparency, a collaborative culture? You don't punish people. I was reading online when AWS failed on Netflix, I think 2-3 years ago, either Netflix or major outage on AWS. There is an admin guy, he or she, I don't know who that, I think it's a he. So he messed up something with the parameter change that actually cascaded the whole thing, and it brought down the AWS significantly. And when I was reading your book, wow, this is amazing, but they did not punish him. So we as leaders, what lesson do you think that we should be taking from that and go talk to them and talk to our team and say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. Other than that, what else, what's your finding? What advice or thoughts that you can share with us on that particular instance in terms of the maturity?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of things that need to be kept in balance, and every company is always trying to keep these things in balance. And I loved hearing both Mac's point of view. How can you measure, predictability and productivity and quality and so forth? Can you optimize for that? And then Stella previously had made a shout out to keeping the developers happy. They want to be using the best automated processes and so forth. So you actually do need to balance developer happiness and productivity and business value that you're delivering. And so there's a lot of things you've got to keep in balance, and it's tricky, and it might feel like you can only do one or the other. We got to get profit, we got to get predictability and throughput, so developer happiness goes away. Or we have to have developer happiness, so we can't really focus on pushing them too much in this direction or that direction. But just like speed and reliability trend together, you can have both developer happiness and throughput and enjoyment of work trend together with the delivery of business value, right? And so the things that Stella was mentioning in terms of what's taught in the SAFe framework, those kinds of values, right? The value stream thinking and the collaboration between the different groups and maximizing business value, whatever framework you're using, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can just say, we're wanting to optimize for both developer satisfaction, happiness, as well business effectiveness. And that is a learning process. It is a learning process you can have an executive level mandate that comes down, but at the end of the day, it's not the executive who's writing code and changing systems. It's got to work for the individual contributor. And there has to be an environment of psychological safety. Like you say, this person at AWS, huge outage, international news, incredible embarrassment, huge cost for AWS. That person kept their job, as far as I'm aware, to this day. And they were never named in that report. It's not human error as the main cause. It's like, what were the conditions that allowed one person to accidentally put the wrong parameter in? Okay. Just because it happened once, you're not punishing that person. You're saying, okay, this is a sign that the system needs more protections to be built in. And they're going to build those protections in and try to do it in such a way that you're balancing developer happiness and productivity with the safety controls. And so you put the safety control in, but in such a way that you don't slow down the organization. So as you can see, there's this balance between all these different things, putting compliance protections in, but automating them so they don't have to slow everybody down, and making it so it works well for the developers. But it's a learning journey. And the only way you can make progress is by optimizing for learning, right? Optimizing for honest feedback. So Stella can come to me as my boss and say, hey, what you're doing, can you do it differently this way? And I can receive that feedback and listen, and I understand with empathy that that's going to help all the other people on the team. And so I want to do it because I really want the whole company to succeed, and I want my job to be easier. So you're dealing with a lot, right? There's all these human factors, and that's really, the teams that Mac is overseeing that have not made progress. Maybe it's because they didn't know how to do it, or they didn't feel comfortable doing it, or they were worried, it was too hard. And so you need to create an environment in which they're comfortable learning. They know they're not going to be punished. You're gradually easing them into this process of improving. It's going to be a long-term process, but so it's a lot, and that's why it's slow, and that's why it's inconsistent, and that's why it takes skilled managers, but it's a valuable learning journey for all of our organizations.
Thank you. And Andrew, we are almost getting there. We only have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to make it a little bit lightning round. So let's see whether we can move to the next topic. So the KPIs, right? You can spend a lot of money. You can spend, whether it's $1, $1 million, whatever, you need to make sure that you are measuring it. So these are the KPI performance indicators, or key performance indicators. And we all know this. This is based out of a DORA metrics. So I have one question, and then we will go to the next topic. Question for Andrew. Can you help the audience to understand the definition of each KPI? And then we will stop this topic and we go to the next topic because of the time.
All right, lightning round. And this is not necessarily comprehensive, but the first two of these speak to speed, or the productivity and your ability to get the throughput, your ability to get work through. And the last two deal with quality and stability. Can you get work through without breaking things? There is also the predictability. There's also developer happiness. So there may be a few other KPIs that you want to take into consideration. These four, though, are considered these four key metrics of DevOps, and all of the research in the State of DevOps reports was kind of organized around this. But what was really beautiful about that is it provided a data-driven explanation for why optimizing, development practices like version control and deployment automation maximizes these metrics, and it also increases employee happiness. And when you optimize for these metrics, it increases company performance. So we're starting to get the data that backs up these things. So it's not just Stella's opinion. It's not just my opinion, Mac's opinion. There's data that backs it all up as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to the next topic in the interest of the time. This is the final topic for us, the role of COE. This is my favorite topic. And when I say my favorite topic, we, as you see, many companies still don't have formal COEs. I had last year at the Dreamforce 2020, it's all virtual Dreamforce. I happened to speak to two major organizations. They were trying to figure out how to set up a COE. But the role of COE, you see the 5-step process. Ultimately, the COE here is to ensure that you are not only helping them to implement and govern and monitor your DevOps, it make sure that you are enabling the delivery excellence. So we talked about this is where you are enabling the delivery teams using the DevOps tools, using the right processes and tools. So Mac, you as a development leader, what would be your top 2 expectations from COE?
Really create the culture of adoption and clear blockers, right? So to the point that Andrew just mentioned, it's really ensuring that the teams that are trying to adopt really understand what it is, and then really remove the blockers and help move the needle around it, right? So every space needs a COE. And also, I would say a complementing function of that is also a community of practice that goes along with the COE, because you need practitioners that are going to create a feedback loop to the COE. So it's an important segment between the two that lines up together.
Great, thank you so much. So one last question to Andrew before we take some questions from the audience. So Andrew, you have, I'm sure you talked to a lot more organizations. Some organizations have COE, some don't have it. Do you see a difference between companies who have COEs implementing the DevOps versus people do it on their own without any kind of COE? Is there a difference? If so, what is it?
I think it just comes down to sharing knowledge and sharing resources and tools being the main thing. The COE can have multiple roles. One can be sharing knowledge. It can be controlling processes, and it can also just be enabling. So there's a lot of different roles that a COE can fall into, but so the right arrangement may vary based on company and so forth, but definitely that knowledge is hard won. If one of Mac's teams figures out how to solve a process, they need to be in strong communication with other groups that are going through the similar challenges, right? So it's building those bridges across the organization. It's making sure you can get lateral communication. Sometimes the COE can be the key bridge to facilitate that communication, bring people together and help everybody to move forward together.
Got it. Okay, thank you. All right, so we are almost time. We have 1 minute, but let me see what questions we have. I wish, this is so exciting for us to continue. I guess 1 hour is not enough. So let's see whether, can you stand for a couple more minutes and we will wrap it up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's see what questions do we have. All right, participants, the chat window. All right. Okay. Um, the question is the future of DevOps. Who can take this one? Is it going to be, is there a disruption coming, or can we rely on the current approach and continue to march? Who can take this?
It's an Andrew question. Go ahead, Andrew.
Future of DevOps. All right. Well, I've got a crystal ball here, so hold on a second. You know, DevOps grew out of the pre-existing movements, you know, whether it was the agile movement or, you know, lean software development, you know, the future, you know, I'm betting on value stream management as being like the next big thing. But the point is, everybody always needs to be improving the way that they work and the way they work together. And it's becoming more and more important. So these kinds of process improvements where you know, the developers are building tools for the business, but who's building tools for the developers, right? Who's helping the development teams to optimize their practices? So that's really what we're talking about, just that is a critically important team that you need to enable within your organization. So there'll be many iterations in the future. Who knows what it'll all look like, but making life easier for the people who are doing the work so they can bring more value to the organization is always going to be a winning strategy.
If I can add a couple of things there, I think what I'm hearing in my circles is also about how AI and machine learning can also help improve the DevOps. So I think in the future, it's not just identifying the loopholes, but how can we even automate fixing these? So we're not going in and now seeing reports and fixing and doing it, but it's automatically correcting and you know, tuning itself. So I'm really excited about that. Feels like, you know, Star Wars a bit, but yeah, it's happening.
So Mac, I think we have a final question for you. If you were to hire and train, what is the best way to create a learning path? Because at the end of the day, you know, you need to educate your team. You need to educate. Well, you know, what's your advice for the leaders who are listening in? How do you put together a team and educate them and train them and get things moving?
Right. So first thing, right, you'll have to start with understanding your current team skills. That's important to really understand where the technology skills lie on, their domain and their methodology skills. Now, methodology of delivery is also important. And I say methodology is whether it's agile or your different set of practices and things around it. And then aligning to a strategy on improving, because different sets of people would need a different strategy around it, self-learning patterns, train the trainer patterns and building onto it. So learning is a culture like the DevOps movement, and it goes hand in hand in terms of how you build onto it. And anytime you miss the mark, especially when you have a larger organizations, you have to align at least 5 to 8% of your budgets for training. And that's what I do, because if you don't do that, you're going to spend a lot more on consulting and the outside effort from where you see it, and your team cannot stand the test of time over a period. So it's important, like things that you notice, that I definitely will have 5% of my budget, outside budget, aligned for training and keeping my team up to date on what's happening around. Right. So.
Thank you, Mac. I do have personally few more questions, but I think in the interest of the time, I do want you to, I realize the time, we are 3 minutes over. I take 1 minute to the audience. So the CRM COE is a platform where people like you, like us, come together and talk about what is happening in the industry. Because we are so buried into everyday's life using your CRM. So it's the whole idea is to bring people, thought leaders, share. So next month on March 26th, we will be talking about CRM and robotics automation. So we are going a little bit outside of our topic, but it's a very relevant topic. CRM, if you have a robotics automation, how can it help to automate your existing native automation? So that's the topic for next month. I will share that on the website. If anybody's interested, please go ahead and register. Now let me take a minute to thank the panelists. Mac, thank you for joining. Andrew, appreciate coming from all the way from California. Michigan, Stella, thank you for joining. And I truly appreciate all of you coming together and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with our community. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.